In the final movie of this chapter, we're going to look at how we can change the browser's standard default buttons to something which is a little bit more attractive. One note that I should point out at this point is that we're referring here to the Windows operating system buttons, as it's not possible to restyle form buttons on Macintosh platforms. So let's dive straight into some code. And you'll see here that the markup and the CSS from the previous examples is at the top of our style element. Down below in the markup, we have an input type equals submit with a value, and this is wrapped inside a div element. Let's take a look at some styling options. First thing that I'm going to do is to add some basic styling to an input which sits inside a div, but which also sits inside a form. So here we're using descendant selectors to target the specific input that we want. And the first basic styling that I'm using is just to add a little bit of padding to the left and to the right of the text within the button. So let's save that file and come over to Firefox to preview. And that's just given the form button just the right amount of spacing that we want. Back over into here, we can really now start to style the input nicely. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a background colour. So let's save that. Over to preview, and now we're going to see the default grey button change into a dark purple button. We can also use the border property. So here I'm adding a 2-pixel double border around the entire input. However, what I'm doing underneath is I'm using a specific rule, changing the border top colour to a lighter pink to give the button a little bit of three-dimensional look. So let's save, refresh over in the browser, and now we're getting to the point where we can start to see the CSS really making a difference. We can also change the font inside form buttons. Here I'm making the font bold, but much smaller than the browser default, and picking a specific typeface. So let's change that. Have one more look into here. And that's now reduced the size of the font, but it's still not quite complete. So let's add the final rules. The next rule that I'm going to add is to change the colour of the text from black to white, and also to use the text transform property to make all the text in that button uppercase. So let's save the file over into the browser and refresh. And now we have our completed form button. Now at this point it's also worth noting that we're able to use the hover and active states to create interactive buttons without JavaScript. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this rule and drop that down below. I'm now going to add the syntax for hover. But I don't need to duplicate all of the rules from the previous style, because the only one I want to change is the background colour. So let's remove anything which is unnecessary. Change the background colour, perhaps to this. Save the file and flip over into the browser. Let's do a refresh, and as you can see, the off state of the button remains the same, but as we move our mouse over the button, the background colour changes. And we can do similar things for the active and the focus states. We can also use other rules to style buttons in individual ways, perhaps adding background images. So I hope that you've seen that we don't need to rely on using images to replace those usually clunky looking operating system default buttons, we can use CSS, remove the need for images, and create some very attractive and interactive buttons.